Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing? Good. Me too. Today, we are going to examine deeper than we have in the past changes to expect with the offensive coordinator. New hire, Arthur Smith, of course. So you probably remember, I assume you listened last week. We dug into some of the bad things, like this is some awful tendencies by Canada, etc. I urge you to go check that out if you didn't. And basically said, folks, take this as a positive because there's nowhere to go but up. Well, let's get more specific with it. So last year, the Steelers had the number one highest run rate on early downs in the first three quarters. That's important because early downs, the game doesn't dictate I have to pass. The fourth quarter, you're often, Steelers opening day against the Niners, they planned on running like crazy, hypothetically. But you're losing like crazy in the fourth quarter. So those things are out the window. So a good barometer of how a team game plans is what do you do on early downs in the first three quarters? The Steelers were number one in terms of run rate at 53%. But the Falcons were 5. They were at 50% run. And if you look at the last 2 years combined, Atlanta was the NFL's number one run heaviest teams on early downs in the first three quarters, also at 53%. So that part's probably not going to change much. But aside from that high run rate, the offense will look a lot different than Canada's in a lot of different ways. The most obvious one, though, is with play action and motion. So on early downs in the first three quarters, the Falcons use play action 24% of their dropbacks. That's number 4 in the league. That's what you want to hear. You know what I mean? Whereas the Steelers have ranked 31st for years now. Smith's Falcons were also near the top of league in pre-snap motion rates. And I don't have numbers and stuff to back this up, but I'll promise you the way Smith uses motion makes a heck of a lot more sense than the way Canada uses motion. So the Falcons also operated a ton out of heavier personnel sets. And the Steelers did not. So 11 personnel. We're not having this conversation all the time, but that is 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Steelers were at 71%. That was 7th in the league. NFL average is at 62%. So pretty well over. Falcons were at 32nd at 17%. League average for 11 personnel is 62%. They're out there for 17%. That's bonkers. How about any play with 2 tight ends on the field? Falcons were at 61%. That's number 1 in the league. NFL average is 27%, and that's exactly where the Steelers came in as well. So they were average in terms of using 2 tight ends on the field. Along those lines, I know you Kyle Pitts fantasy owners were disappointed, but Atlanta's tight end room, their tight ends combined led the league in receiving yards. They had 1,380 receiving yards from the tight end position, the most in the league. I haven't referenced it much, but ESPN's putting out their lists of best defensive tackles, best edge rushers, and they put out their tight end list recently. And Pat Freiermuth got an honorable mention. He was not in the top 10. But I liked what they had to say about him in that Freiermuth's proverbial third season jump into the elite was sabotaged by a hamstring injury and poor quarterback play and poor scheme. That I added that. He had 32 catches for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns in 12 games. But here's the quote from an NFC executive. He's the guy who should be up there. They mean that in the rankings. He's really skilled and savvy, knows how to get open, just doesn't have the production. I'm really expecting a boom season from Freiermuth. All right, back to these real quick. All plays with 2 running backs on the field. NFL average is 10%. The Steelers were at 4%, which is 17th in the league. Falcons were all the way up to 32%, 4th in the NFL. So you might see, I'm not sure if they'll call Connor Hayward a back or not for this purposes, but I do think we're going to see more pony, with Harris and Warren or Patterson in the combination there. So those are things I think you'd need to count on putting money in the bank, honestly, in terms of personnel differences. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from golf, Major League Baseball, so many more. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, more comparisons. And this is more of a Wilson thing, obviously. So we're going to compare Atlanta and Denver with what they ask out of their quarterbacks. So of passes that traveled 5 or more yards downfield, Denver was dead last. 47% of their throws as a team traveled 5 yards or deeper. Unbelievably low. Where Atlanta was at 60% of passes that traveled 5 yards or further. That doesn't sound like a drastic difference, but that's 32nd in the league versus 4th. Huge difference. Wilson was throwing nearly 30% of his attempts at or behind the line of scrimmage, which ranked 30th. The Falcons were right at NFL average. They were 22%. They were 17th. What if we just look at first downs? Early downs are a very big indicator because you're, first and 10, what the down distance is more often than not. Denver was number 1 in rate of passes thrown within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, still on first down, 62%. Their O-line wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad. But think like Alvin Kamara with Sean Payton. There was like 3 years in a row he caught 83 balls. That's what Denver was doing. Quick hitters at or behind the line of scrimmage. Meanwhile, on first downs, Atlanta was 27th compared to first for Denver, and passes thrown within 5 yards of the line at 48%. Also on first downs, Denver was last in passes thrown 5 yards downfield, where Atlanta was at 58%. But how about yards 5 to 15? Denver was also last, 23%, where Atlanta was 5th in passes thrown 5 to 15 yards downfield. They don't look like massively different, but they really are. And if we really look at Wilson when he was at his best on first down passes, it's pretty impressive. So within 5 yards of the line, he was 42nd in EPA per play. With a 46% success rate, yards per attempt was only 5.2, 72% completion percentage. Within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, Wilson was 42nd. But on 5+ air yards, he was 2nd in EPA per attempt. His success rate was about the same. His yards per attempt was 3rd best on 5+, as opposed to 20th best on 5 and under. And his completion percentage was 19th best on 5+, as opposed to 37th best. So it was really a round hole, square peg type of situation with all the short throwing, because Wilson's not even great at it. He was much better when they threw the ball down the field. And relative to the rest of the league, Wilson was a liability on these short passes, but made them at the highest rate last year. I mean, to me, that's not a great reflection on Payton, who gets a lot of the benefits of doubts, rightfully so, and definitely is not a good marriage between Wilson and Payton. So he was top 3 in both EPA per attempt and yards per attempt when throwing the ball 5 or more yards downfield, which is what Smith's going to ask him to do. It's exactly what Smith's going to ask him to do. The pass rate won't be high, but when they pass, there should be far less of the dump-off variety that Wilson wasn't good at. So the more I study this, with the exception of throwing between the numbers in the middle of the field, which I do think is a Wilson weakness, this passing game marriage sets up a lot better than I would have originally expected. So, again, I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your butt to get you excited, but there are some things to get excited about. And back to that podcast and how we opened it before, there's nowhere to go but up. All right, take care.